You are listening to 13 Past Midnight with Steve Stockton.
Are there such things as animal ghosts or spirits? I'm inclined to believe so, not only due to other encounters I've heard or read about, but also from personal experience. In Volume 1 of my Strange Things in the Woods series, I wrote about ghost kittens heard along a creek bank. But in my own personal experience, I heard them beneath the floorboards of my bedroom, from early childhood to my mid-teenage years. Growing up, I lived in a brick rancher-style house built new when I was but a few months old. Needless to say, we were the first family to live in the house. My father had worked closely with the builder, and the house was built to exacting specifications. Rather than have a basement, my father preferred an unfinished crawlspace beneath the house. And I'm here to tell you, it was just that. You had exactly enough room to crawl. The only way you could have stood up is if you were a toddler. One day while playing in my bedroom, which had a hardwood floor with an area rug, I became tired and rested my head on the carpet, only to be surprised by the sound of several tiny kittens mewling. Shocked, I immediately got together some gear, namely a flashlight, and headed into the crawlspace to rescue the kittens. The crawlspace ran the entire length of the three-bedroom house, only ending where the concrete pad for our attached single-car garage was. There was only one way in or out, a small 3-foot by 3-foot door on the side of the house. My father stored lawn care instruments and tools in the tallest part of the space, so the door was always padlocked from the outside. The tiny louvered openings, there were 4 total, 2 on the front and a matching equidistant pair on the back side of the dwelling, were approximately 1-inch metal grid with a fine mesh, think window screen, securely fastened over that. Only the tiniest of insects could have penetrated that, and there was no way a cat or kitten of any size could gain entry of its own doing or volition. I located the key from the cabinet in the garage where it always hung from a hook, and with trusty giant flashlight in hand, set out to enter the netherworld of the crawlspace. Previously, I'd remained content to peer in when my father was putting something in or taking something out. The crawlspace was dank, dark, and seemed to be a haven for spiders, not my idea of fun at the time. As expected, I found the lock firmly in place on the hasp screwed into the crawlspace door. If anyone had been in, they would have had to take the time to unscrew the hasp and then reattach the same. As the painted wooden door creaked open, I thumbed the button on my flashlight and flooded the darkened crawlspace with light. The only things near the opening were the gardening and lawn implements my father normally stored in the space. Kneeling, I played the flashlight beam over the area, peering into the far corners as well as I could. If possible, I wanted to rescue the cat and her kittens without going underneath the house. It's not that I was scared of the dark, actually far from it, and I wasn't really keen on spider inhabitants, but my real fear was one of the neighborhood pranksters would lock me inside the crawlspace. I considered this for a bit, then smugly put the padlock into the pocket of my jeans and crawled inside. Regardless of the creepy factor, I gently closed the plywood door behind me, plunging the crawlspace into absolute darkness. Armed with a narrow and not-so-bright beam of my flashlight, I began the hunched-over crab walk to scour the part of the crawlspace with the most headroom. As I made my way farther back, I actually had to lay on my belly in the musty, dusty dirt and Indian crawl my way back towards where the crawlspace ended and the concrete pad of the garage floor began. When I finished, I'd covered every inch of the blasted crawlspace. There was absolutely no kittens to be found. No trace of anything, except for a few annoyed spiders, whom were as happy to be left alone as I was to leave them alone. There were no other living creatures within these dirt, cinder block, brick, and wood confines. Rather perplexed and somewhat disappointed, I wanted pet kittens. I made my way back to the wooden door and sighed a sigh of relief when it opened, bathing me in a shaft of sunlight and a puff of fresh air. No local yokel prankster had spotted my vulnerable quest and decided to lock me in. I climbed out the opening, brushed the dirt from my clothes and cobwebs from my hair, and headed back inside to think this turn of events over. As if to tempt fate, I marched straight into my bedroom on the back southwest corner of the house and flopped down on my area rug exactly as before. Sure enough, within the space of 15 odd minutes or so, I once again heard the unmistakable mewling of at least 2 or 3 kittens. I tried to ignore the sound as best I could, but eventually it got the better of me. I geared up once again and headed back into the crawlspace, determined to put an end to this once and for all. As I sort of expected, the second trip was the same, as well as subsequent third and fourth trips, eventually totaling at least a dozen, I'm sure. The kittens started their eerie meowing and mewling when I was approximately 10 years old and continued on for some time, years. Although for whatever reason, perhaps old age, my parents were never able to hear the kittens, no matter how determined they were. However, my best friend and next-door neighbor, John, who visited often, said he could hear the kittens as well. Imagine my shock and surprise the first time he quipped, "Hey, I think you have kittens under your house," when I had never mentioned my previous experiences. The last time I heard the kittens was when I was 15 years old. We were moving to a new house in the Carnes area, and my bed and furniture had already been moved. As I fell asleep on the floor during the last night I would ever sleep in the house, I drifted off, tired from the day's activities, with the sound of mewling phantom kittens in my ear. In my second book, More Strange Things in the Woods, I wrote about a ghostly dog who, even though he had passed away, continued to be sighted on the family farm. In fact, there are a lot of such tales. I've also heard of other cats, long since buried in the backyard, that would brush against their owner's ankle in the dark, or perhaps take a contented rest on the bed in the dark, purring all the while. If you have a ghostly pet story to tell, I'd love to hear it. Feel free to contact me via any of the means listed in the description.